things that they bring to the table is, RTX in the data center. You guys probably were familiar with our RTX announcement a few years back. It started out in the GeForce line in the gaming world. Obviously, everything that starts there starts bleeding over into the professional realm. But prior to those RTX cards, the only GPU we had that offered RTX in the data center was actually the T4. But the T4 is a sort of underclocked version of the RTX cards. So good low power card, but not giving you the horsepower that's required for a lot of the architecture engineering apps. So being able to leverage a high-end RTX GPU in the cloud, giving you lots of GPU horsepower, giving you our RT cores for ray tracing, applications that are doing real-time rendering, which they're multiplying every day. The various applications that leverage it because it does it so efficiently when you have the horsepower behind them. But it's been a great tool for the AEC space specifically.
And what's following? What are you guys coming up with now? I think the A40 is coming down the road.
Yeah. So A40 is basically the successor to the RTX 6000 and 8000. So the RTX 6000 and 8000 were basically the same GPU from a compute perspective. The difference only was the amount of frame buffer they had. So there was 6000's 24 gigabytes, 8000's 48. The A40 following that is our newest architecture. So RTX is our Turing generation architecture. A40 is going to be our Ampere generation architecture. So more powerful compute, and the A40 comes in basically only a 48 gigabyte frame buffer variant. So the ability to have more users with higher frame buffer amounts on there, and giving you even more powerful compute resources.
Collaboration was a big challenge actually back in 2020, which is getting collaboration tools worked on these DAS machines, specifically providing them with the horsepower required for a smooth kind of communication all across, back and forth. And one of the observations that we came across was that when you run these machines on a GPU accelerated virtual desktop, it runs much. You run these applications actually on GPU accelerated desktop, it runs much smoother and works much better and finer, I may say, than a non-GPU accelerated one. So was that an element that you guys took into consideration when you were coming up with the A40? That's a question to you, Jimmy. So I was just wondering if that was one of the factors that you guys have considered when you were going into the A40 direction.
Oh yeah. Sorry, I missed the end of your missed the end of your question. Yeah, I mean, so collaboration has obviously always been an issue, especially in the AEC space. It started with just sort of version control in general. How do we make sure people are not working on the floor plan final copy of a copy that's on their laptop that nobody else knows about. First, just taking all of that data and centralizing it, like I talked about earlier, in a VDI environment, it's a great place to start. Bringing that all into one central location so everybody sees everything, they're connecting to it. That data resides right alongside the VM that you're working on. But one of the things that that we've been working on a lot, and some of you may have seen some of our recent announcements about a tool called Omniverse. Omniverse is us sort of taking collaboration to the next level. So it leverages our RTX technology. We've designed it sort of with A40 in mind at the same time, because it's a very powerful GPU and the application is a very powerful collaboration tool, basically giving you capabilities of real-time collaboration in a virtual space. And trying to address the issue that, I'm sure you guys are all aware of bringing all of these various applications together and making them talk to each other and play well with each other. You may have one person who needs to work in one application to do one task, another person, to work on another application to do another task. You don't want to, give everybody just a hammer to try and do all of their work. Giving them the right tools to do the right job becomes important. So bringing them together and making them work together is something that we've really been trying to enable the remote workforce to do more efficiently.
Some of the notes that I came across, Gartner says that many organizations only had the capacity to handle a small subset of users and weren't prepared to enable all employees for remote work during the pandemic. And that was an observation that came out of Gartner recently. Many companies lacked the required bandwidth to support all users working remotely simultaneously, and others lacked the assets actually, or the licensing, or the different components required to get these guys to operate efficiently. So, questions back to you, Mike. Were you guys caught off guard, and how fast did you respond, and what was your way out of this kind of situation?
We were caught a little bit off guard. Bandwidth, we were fine. We had our main data center has 1 gig by 1 gig coming in with a 500 meg backup that we could turn up. So we were good there. We did have to stand up a couple extra VPN servers in different locations. Panzera helped a lot. I mean, we were well into that we were able to have our data local. The ones that caught us off guard were we really didn't keep tabs on people or folks at home with their home internet. We had some folks that were using cell phones as a hotspot trying to connect to our VPN, and they were trying to open 10, 12, 30 meg files, and it just did not work. When schools closed down and a couple of ladies were stuck at home, and that's kind of our success story with IronOrbit, is that we were able to get them on, stand a Panzera up in IronOrbit, and even with those horrible internet connections, they were still able to work. They were still able to do. One lady was a marketing lady who did a bunch of stuff in InDesign. The other one was an ArcGIS and a CAD user, and even with their cellular internet that they were using, they were able to continue to work. So we were pretty good, and maybe it was because we're a smaller company. I mean, we're under 400 folks, so maybe we got lucky just because of the size that we are. But we were caught off guard, but we were able to, within a couple of days, we had a couple more VPN servers up, a couple more VPN clients pushed out to people, and if they couldn't get into one, they could try. We had 4 different ones, one going to our Madison office, one going to our Des Moines office, and one going to our corporate headquarters.
That's interesting. Tyler, did you guys have pretty much the same experience? I know that you moved to DAS somewhere in 2020, but the question was, did you see this coming before the pandemic, or was it the result of the pandemic, actually, this particular decision?
We were set up pretty well. We like Mike, had to spin up a lot of extra VPN capacity just because of everyone working remotely. We did have our own VDI stood up already before IronOrbit, but we, as part of a DR push and just trying to extend our capabilities into what IronOrbit offered, they were a good partner. So that's what led us to go into IronOrbit. But this was all pre-pandemic, but it did help us a lot, of course, during these times and pushing more people towards using VDI. We still have a struggle with getting people to adopt VDI just because of the nature of, I think that's just how people like to work. It's just VDI is kind of a hard concept for certain people, and sometimes, performance, depending on the application, you just need to work on twisting certain knobs to make it function the right way, and that's just a perception thing. But yeah, we had little challenge, I would say. I mean, but like everyone else, there was some challenge during the pandemic.
One of the observations we came across with a recent McKinsey report states that disruption is reshaping the world's largest ecosystem. Obviously, disruptions comes in many forms, in many shapes. Also, another report from Deloitte says that most engineering and construction companies continue to face sustained cost and margin pressures. Additionally, despite strong order books, companies are experiencing challenges such as project delays and cancellations, as well as the difficulty obtaining permits and so on and so forth. Also, increases in the procurement costs of materials and equipment continue to kind of stymie many AEC companies in the industry out there. I know a bunch of companies actually who
ran into some of these problems. I mean, hands-on, straightforward. They were waiting for some projects to happen to move on with their IT plans, and then these projects were stalled. They didn't, move in as fast as they wanted to, and they were running into a lot of turbulent kind of, I would say, kind of environments over here. So, what do you guys think? And then that's a question specifically for you, Mike, to start with. Did you face any of these challenges, like project delays, cancellations, getting the permits, procurement? Because, procurement was mainly disrupted during this pandemic, right? So
we actually did okay in procuring projects. The ones that we kind of ran into issue with were smaller communities where a lot of their income comes from tourism, people visiting, parking tickets, stuff like that, that they planned on some money that just didn't happen. And to keep clients, we kind of let them off the hook of these projects because they didn't have the money to spend at that time. So we had a couple of issues that way. In the IT terms of our projects that we had going, we actually got more money in the pandemic to keep things going. We had more money in our budget, or more money at our disposal to help facilitate a lot of these work from home projects. So we were pretty lucky that way.
how about you guys? Tyler, I know a bunch of customers, a bunch of companies who ran into these challenges. They weren't as fortunate as others, obviously, and I also heard of a lot of mergers and acquisitions, that there was a lot of acquisitions happening in 2020, specifically companies who weren't troubled, going out and acquiring the smaller ones who had their projects canceled or ran into some of these problems. So what's your take on this, Tyler?
Well, fortunately, the sectors we find ourselves in, we align with the water, renewables, power, and infrastructure. So, I mean, of course, those things we were impact. Every business is impacted. It's just how greatly were you impacted. It depends on what industries you're in, right? And for us, there was impact, but it was smaller than most. We actually grew a lot so far. So we've actually extended our IT capabilities, and like Mike, we've funneled a lot more money into doing remote capabilities, and so we might be an anomaly in that regard. But I know, yeah, like you said, there's a lot of companies out there, and we're one of those companies where we're focused on remote work, and we're always looking for other companies, like you said, to add to our portfolio, and it doesn't matter where they are.
So what's the take here? Was it the bigger companies were able to sustain more, or is it just because of what these companies usually focus on from an industry perspective? So
yeah, I'm not an economic expert, but if you had asked me, I mean, of course, if you look at what the pandemic, what industries it affected, if you're aligned with other industries that, like for us, renewables is a continued focus for the U.S. economy. I mean, there's a lot of money being dumped into it all the time. So for us, it kind of aligns with projects coming in. We have a healthy backlog, but I think. And again, not an economic expert, but if I had to make an educated guess, I would say it's because of where the money is in the economy.
What I've been hearing is we're doing well now. We think we're going to do well in 2021, possibly half of 2022. Then they're worried. They're worried that that's when all the money's going to dry up and the projects are going to start really to slow down from the pandemic, because we really do move at a couple of years behind of the economy, and we're in a good spot now. We had the same thing in 2008, been here long enough, of course, but same thing 2008, 2009, we were doing good, and then about 2010, 2011, it got really, really bad. So that's when we went through that. We're kind of thinking that that's where we're going to end up here in 2023, maybe. And that's why we're kind of keeping an eye on everything that way.
I think some of it too is not necessarily relative to size, but rather a company's nimbleness. Are they able to adapt quickly? Are they able to work with partners to solve their solution quickly and efficiently? That's often really all it comes down to. Now, it is more difficult to steer a larger ship quickly, usually, but I mean, I work with large and small companies, some large companies that are able to turn on a dime and some small companies that take forever to change. So it's just about how they can adapt.